So I want to end our conversation about this idea of really parenting in challenging times with this idea of how do we teach kids to cope better and to build their resiliency. When I talk about resiliency, what I'm talking about is I'm talking about this idea of bouncing back. So if you think about a time when maybe you were going through something tough. So for example, maybe you were looking for a job and it was really hard, and then you found a job and then you bounced back from that feeling of, oh, maybe I'm never going to find a job. That's resiliency. Can I go through an experience that creates stress for me and bounce back? And bounce back in a way that I'm functioning at the same level that I was prior to that experience, or perhaps even better, and that I have a better sense of, I really am a competent person with lots of skills that people want to hire, for example. So resiliency has to do with that ability. And humans are very good at this. I mean, we're very adaptive, and we're put into situations frequently, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's COVID, whatever it might be, the challenges, what we thought we knew was our ability to cope and prompts us to develop new ones. So we just talked about the idea of self-care and how some of, learning new skills there, trying different things, reaching out to other people, expanding your sort of, your menu of coping skills, all of that helps to build resiliency. And kids need that help as well. So for example, maybe you have a child who's really good at being able to go out and play sports, and that they get a lot of their sort of frustrations and, angst or whatever out in sports, but now they can't do that. And how can you help that child? So physicality might be really important to them. Can you do a yoga class together? Can you think about different ways that they can use that physicality in a more structured, available way, and help them to understand that you're still being physical and you're still using all those skills, but you're using it in a little bit different way. So thinking about taking the skill that the child has, or taking and then building on that, giving them other opportunities that are more appropriate, that are safer, whatever it needs to be, helps to build resiliency. The other piece about resiliency that I think is important for folks to think about is that when we are resilient and when we reflect and think about, wow, I did better in that situation than I thought I would, we start to feel more efficacy. Efficacy is that sense of, I make a difference, that I have the ability to impact my world. And it's really important in terms of self-esteem, in terms of identity, in terms of all those things that help us to navigate life in kind of a happier, healthier way. And so resiliency and efficacy are two things that go together, and they're really important for kids. One of the things that, there's a few things that we can take away from COVID, but one of the things that I take away from this whole experience of COVID is that it almost forces us to really think about, how do we make a difference? How can we really overcome this challenge? And it forces us to look at different options. So in our last conversation, I talked a little bit about, rediscovering reading. So, doing that helps me to feel like, okay, I have this kind of skill that has not been used very much. Now that I'm using it, I have a better understanding of the world. I feel like I have a better sort of picture of politics or whatever, all of these different things that contribute to my sense of I have more efficacy. I can make a bigger difference in my own world. So that becomes really important. So identifying those things with kids, and then thinking of ways that you can develop it, you can support it, you can encourage it to go in a different direction. Another issue about coping that I think kind of goes back to the idea of our alarm system is that when our alarm systems go off, there's a huge amount of energy that's released, and adrenaline and cortisol are the two chemicals that kind of dictate that and kind of flood our brains. But the physical energy that goes with that can be very difficult to contain, especially for kids, because they don't really understand it. We all need a certain amount of energy to just function in the world, and we all have different comfort levels. When you're thinking about helping your child cope, it becomes really important to think about that energy. If you have a child who is what we call escalated, or we call dysregulated in a way that their energy is in an uncomfortable level, whether it's too high or too low, the best thing we can do is try to help that child regulate, to bring that energy back into its comfort zone. So why is that important? So when kids are dysregulated or out of their comfort zone with either energy that's too high or too low, they end up not being able to use their executive functions. So if you have a really angry child, there's really no point in reasoning with them, right? So what we want to do is we want to help that child bring that energy down to a level where they're more regulated. And then we might be able to have a conversation with them. Or we might be able to teach them something, or we might be able to ask them to consider another option. But until that energy is in a more comfortable zone, all of those skills, problem-solving skills, being able to think of consequences, being able to, think about the future, all of those things are offline. The executive functions are just not available because they are in freeze, fight, flee response. So thinking about that as a way to also build coping skills, helping kids to understand there's ways you can bring your energy up, there's ways you can bring it down. And doing it when they're not either dysregulated in a down way or an up way is really helpful. So an example of that might be when you are, building a structure for your child, that you build in maybe 10 minutes a day, that you practice different ways that let's get our energy up. Let's, run around the house, or let's do jumping jacks, or let's, pull a rope together, whatever it might be. And then let's work on bringing our energy down. Let's do some deep breathing. Let's do some isometrics. Let's do some stretches. Those kinds of things help children to learn that their body has different energy and that they can control how much energy they're experiencing at a time, and that when they're upset, either sad or mad or whatever it might be, they can manage that energy at least to a certain degree. And in that way, help them have a sense of, okay, I can cope with this. I can manage this. I can make a difference in the way that my body's responding. I can help manage this particular uncomfortable feeling. So there's lots of different ways to do all of these things, and lots of different, tools out there. There's a wonderful website by Bruce Perry, it's the Child Trauma Academy. That's a place where he talks about a lot of different specific skills as well.